Kaze no Klonoa Moonlight Museum, that's a long name, was released for the Bandai WonderSwan in May of 1999. There are probably a couple of you wondering what the heck a WonderSwan is. Well, it was a Japanese exclusive handheld console created by the man himself, Gunpei Yokoi. It was actually the last piece of hardware he made before his unfortunate passing. And trust me when I say this, the WonderSwan is awfully overlooked! It was like the Game Boy, and that was great because it was crap, but the WonderSwan was 16-bit, could play games both horizontally and vertically, and had a very unique library. It's one of the most standout platforms I've seen, but did it sell well? Is that even a question? I seriously doubt Moonlight Museum was a commercial success either. Maybe for the console standards it did, but I wasn't able to find any sales figures. But the game received quite a bit of promotion, with a special edition WonderSwan including the game existing and even a website, all for a spin-off. It might just be me, but Moonlight Museum feels like that one overlooked game with a niche following in a series, so it doesn't seem like this game has one. That may have something to do with the fact that Klonoa is already an overlooked series with a niche following, or does it have anything to do with the game? It's not entirely clear when Moonlight Museum is supposed to take place. I'm not even sure if Klonoa has a consistent timeline at all, but I feel like this game fits somewhere. It definitely can't be after the first game, since it would retcon the entire ending. Plus, according to the Wikipedia page, it takes place beforehand anyways, but it's implied that Klonoa entered Phantomile as soon as he woke up in the beginning. So, my guess is that Moonlight Museum is one of the false memories Klonoa had, even though I'm pretty sure this has never been confirmed. We begin with a monologue about dreams. Dreams are seen at night, but the night is dark and hides the dreams away. But the moon illuminates the night, meaning dreams can be seen. You know, nightlights are also a good investment. Some asshole artists at a museum stole fragments of the moon for their collection, causing the moon to disappear. A girl's upset over this, so Klonoa shows up out of nowhere, exclaims, and sets off to recover the fragments and return the moon to its former glory. Klonoa and Hupo head into the mysterious museum, where Klonoa demands they get back the moon fragments. Instead, they're shut up and told to appreciate the art. I mean, it's a museum, you gotta pay some respect to their work. At each world, Klonoa and Hupo meet up with a new artist. In World 1, they encounter Baku, who likes to use people's memories as beautiful paint. Klonoa gets nostalgic over the painting on its quiet hometown, which seems to resemble Breescale. Baku explains that if they want the moon fragments back, they'll have to pull a Super Mario 64 and enter the painting to search for them. After collecting the moon fragments in the first world, Baku is impressed, but the duo realize they don't have every single one and check out the next gallery. Here at World 2, Klonoa and Hupo stumble upon Truffle, the curator of Giant Fortress. Ironically, Truffle is a tiny person. Klonoa asks where the remaining moon fragments are, to which Truffle answers that they're located inside the giant. Klonoa and Hupo are suddenly Bowser's Inside Storied and enter the next world. After exploring every nook and cranny, Klonoa and Hupo escape, to which Truffle learns a valuable lesson about how the inside is all that matters. Hey, at least this game has morals. World 3 gets Klondike Bar and Hupo involved with Koof, a comic artist. The duo are impressed by Koof's comics, but are frightened by Laughing Prison, his newest creation. And wouldn't you know it, that just so happens to be where the moon fragments are located. And once they get out of that mess, Hupo realizes that comics are better off read than explored. Say that to Comic Zone. Koof is a bit disappointed, but it's time for the group to head to the next gallery. The fourth world features a photographer named Kaho and her photo of the Endless Palace of Clouds. She forcefully sends Klonoa and Hupo into this world without their permission, but I mean, they had to go there anyways. More moon fragments. And after that fiasco, Kaho sends Klonoa and Hupo off to the final gallery. What they'll find there is the true art. The final area is the museum itself, who would have thunk it? The museum is apparently alive, and it explains how art and dreams are virtually the same. And since the moon illuminates dreams, they stole the moon to illuminate art. I mean, it would also ruin the gravitational pull and tidal waves and unleash pure chaos, but okay, I understand. Wait a second, that literally makes no fuck. Thankfully, Klonoa and Hupo manage to recover every moon fragment, which saddens the artist. Klonoa returns them to the girl, who's thankful that the moon can show up tonight. The moon appears larger and more beautiful, which even attracts the artist. Hupo shares words of wisdom. How if dreams make the moon bigger, art can also make the moon shine. But the moon, according to Klonoa, that moon is our art. Then roll credits and turn back to the artists who are still salting and create even more artwork. Then the museum finishes with actually entertaining levels. All has Klonoa skills, Klonoa passes them all, the artists still can't think of hidden ones right yet again, but the nameless role being the one logical character here just wants to leave the moon alone. And that's a basic summary of the plot. The story isn't nearly as complex as Door to Phantomile or even any other Klonoa game, but regardless, I still think it's passable enough to work on its own and feel somewhat satisfying. However, there are some aspects that get on my nerves. First of all, what if these antagonists, and I put that loosely because they hardly qualify as antagonists at all, They went out of their way to steal the moon just to enhance their art or whatever, and they do nothing to stop Klonoa from retrieving it. In fact, they're the ones who allow him to enter their artwork, so they're practically handing him the plot device. Was the intention that these guys were just so bloated and pretentious they assumed Klonoa wouldn't be able to pass their puzzles? And no, they aren't boss fights either. Also, this is a bit of a minor nitpick, but I do wish they got just a little more screen time. You don't really get a good look at them aside from the cover art. But my biggest problem is that I just can't seem to get engaged with the story. This might be more of a personal issue, but I have trouble caring for this game's plot. And it's not because it's basic. I've played games with even simpler storytelling, or writing so cheesy you become lactose intolerant, or in general a complete mess, and I was invested in their plots way more. Why did I have to extend that sentence so much? I could have just said Sonic Adventure and everyone would understand my point. I doubt it has anything to do with Moonlight Museum being in Japanese either, as Klonoa Hero Story enticed me, and that's another Japan-only game. Plus, I was following along with that translation guide, which, by the way, was really helpful, and you bet I'll show it! I blame my lack of attachment with the cutscene presentation. On one hand, the pictures look pretty nice, it gives you a good idea of what the characters are doing. But on the other, I feel like this method is a bit too simplistic. Since the characters are completely static during the cutscenes, I can't get a grasp on how they're feeling in the moment. It's not a fair comparison by any means, but look at how they handle the cutscenes in the GBA games. They're also pretty simple, but they do a good job of making the characters feel more dynamic. I'll still give them a pass since this was their first time, but jeez do I find this story uninteresting. So, the story is a bit underwhelming, at least compared to other Klonoa games, but we haven't even touched the gameplay. Has it hopefully held up well? Unlike Door to Phantomile, which had a huge emphasis on action platforming, Moonlight Museum is more focused on puzzles, so going in, you shouldn't expect a fast-paced, exhilarating adventure, but instead a more laid-back experience that requires you to think more. I'll admit that I'm horrible at puzzle games for the most part, and I definitely prefer action-based games, but I can still get behind them. I think what I should really be looking for is if Moonlight Museum not only succeeds at being a good Klonoa game, but also a good puzzle game, and also a good platformer. There's actually a lot of changes this game introduced. It's almost like the gold and silver of Klonoa, if that makes any sense. While the first has 6 visions split into 6 worlds, plus a final and extra vision, Moonlight Museum has a total of 36 levels, which are divided between 5 worlds and a bonus. This seems like a great idea. In fact, it's surprising how much longer Moonlight Museum is seeing how it's on a handheld. But I'll explain what's right and wrong about this system later. Each vision contains 30 Dreamstones each, and if you manage to collect them all, they gather into a painting. And once you nab all 180 in one world, the painting will be complete. This may seem worthless since it doesn't unlock anything special. I mean, you could just Google, or Bing, or Safari, or whatever search engine that you use what the pictures look like. But I'm glad they at least give you the incentive. Door to Phantomile can also keep track of how many Dreamstones you have, but your only reward is an enemy featured in that level showing up on the map screen. It wasn't that hard finding all the Dreamstones in a world anyway, so I didn't mind attempting the side quest. Besides, these pictures look pretty sweet. Too bad I couldn't be arsed to finish the extra vision painting though, because it's probably my favorite. The health system was also altered a little. You now only have 3 hearts instead of 6. I actually don't mind this change, but I don't get why it was made at all. Like I said, it's a puzzle platformer, and there's not much action going on. If anything, shouldn't Klonoa have the increased health so he's not dying all the time? They probably could have just pulled a Wario Land 2 and not included a health system at all, but maybe I'm thinking too deep into this. So, how do you assume you'd finish stages? By just going to the end? That's how normal platformers do it. Not in Moonlight Museum's case. Now, there's a barrier at the exit that requires you to collect all 3 moon fragments in each vision before leaving. I don't mind this since it makes level design much more open-ended. Well, at least on paper, but I want to discuss that more later. Of course, a platformer wouldn't be complete without assets. Thank God Moonlight Museum includes some of those. There were a lot of new mechanics that started in this game, and some returning ones from Phantomile were expanded upon. The biggest addition are definitely the move blocks. You can pick them up, throw them, jump on them, clip through them, and basically do anything with it that a block could. They're pretty much moves, but instead they're blocks. Yeah, no shit. Seriously though, these were used in puzzles and regular platforming very often. But you know what? I think they work just fine. In my book, they were definitely an important inclusion. As for a couple other new mechanics, Vision 1.5 adds these floating spheres Klonoa can hang onto and some can move in a set path. Vision 3.4 introduces blocks that can't be picked up but are movable, as well as these 1500 megawatt aperture science heavy-duty super colliding super buttons. Vision 4 starts including these giant move blocks that can only be destroyed through explosives, and there are also these blocks that can change the direction an explosion is heading. And Vision 5 brings probably the most innovative feature. That's right, doors! That function like portals! But how do you spice up level design? Collectibles? Well, yeah, those, but I think we all know where this would go. I'm actually referring to enemies. There aren't a whole lot in this game, but you've got all the necessities. Waddle Dee 2 Electric Boogaloo, Parasols, Gordos, Shotzos, and the Bomb-esque Bombers. I think what's interesting is that each world introduces a new enemy, and most of the puzzles inside a world are often designed around those specific enemies. But mechanics, baddies, level design, none of that matters in a puzzle game unless there are puzzles, otherwise it's failing at its one job. I won't lie, the puzzles in this game are actually pretty good. They're probably not the most elaborate in the world, but compare them to the ones in Phantomile. This is about how complex the puzzles got in the first game. Alright, that's okay. You might have to use a fraction of brain power. Still not too complicated, but this game is more focused on the action. What do you expect? Now let's take a gander at Moonlight Museum. Again, it could just be since I suck at puzzle games, but I really had to think when solving them. In fact, on my first run through, I got so stumped I had to look up a Let's Play just to pass a few levels. I really wish I could show more of these because they're honestly really well thought out and most importantly, fun to solve. And I get it. The GBA games have more advanced puzzles, eat up new minya. I'm just comparing them to how they were in Phantomile. And between the two, Moonlight Museum is superior in the puzzle department. And what are the odds? This just so happens to be a puzzle game. But I'd say the most intriguing aspect of Moonlight Museum is the orientation changing. I mentioned this briefly earlier, but the WonderSwan can play games both horizontally and vertically. Most games just use one or the other, which was probably for the best. Moonlight Museum here thought it was too cool to utilize just one orientation and decided to take advantage of both. Wow, talk about innovation. A majority of the visions are in horizontal mode, but a couple here and there are vertical. These kinds of levels must have taken a page from Knuckles' Chaotix, as they're obviously much taller in design. The limited horizontal view luckily doesn't get in the way due to this game's slower pace at least, but truth be told, what's even the point of this? It's not like the game needed to change to an upright position. Those levels are still very much playable horizontally. I can confirm this because they literally allow you to change which orientation you want to play in after finishing a vision. It's nice to see them take advantage of the WonderSwan's capabilities, but can you not arbitrarily force a gimmick like this down our throats again? Considering future installments, they learned from this mistake. I've praised Moonlight Museum quite a bit, and maybe shared a couple nitpicks, but I think it's time I discuss my bigger problems with the game. I went over the returning enemies, so why didn't I talk about any new ones? Well, that's because there aren't any. You'll be dealing with the same 6 throughout the entire game. Come on, even Super Mario Bros. On the NES had more variety. I understand that the selection was probably based off how well they'd suit the puzzles, and like I said, I think what they went with works just fine. But couldn't they have thrown in a couple more? At the very least, more different forms of moves like giant moves or shielded moves would fit. So the enemy selection is a bit disappointing. The bosses on the other hand are good, right? Well, if good means non-existent, then yes, these are some of the greatest boss battles I've ever experienced. I'm assuming their train of thought was bosses were too action-packed or something along those lines. Not to accuse them of that, but if it is the case, I like to point to a pretty small, kinda niche puzzle series not too many people know about. Sorry, I meant Zelda. In all seriousness, I can't think of any other platformer that neglects boss fights of all things. I alluded to this earlier, but it's now time to go in depth about it. I am very mixed about the level design. Some levels can be enjoyable, I won't deny that, but it feels like half of them are just these giant hub areas with puzzles leading off in different directions. I'd be fine with this approach if it weren't for the key system. Originally, the keys were just used on occasion. All they did was roadblock you temporarily so you could explore more of the level. It worked due to the linear design and progression of the visions so you wouldn't be skipping out on large portions of them. And in later levels, you could collect these keys in any order you want, allowing you to change up revisits. That half of Moonlight Museum's levels I was talking about seemed like they were designed in an open-ended manner, but the use of keys do nothing but railroad them and force you to complete them in the intended order every single time. You often can't take an alternate path unless you're holding the right key. That's not to say I hate this style. I love Luigi's Mansion and that game also uses a breadcrumb structure. But, I don't know. I was fine with it in that game, but in this instance it kind of ruins the experience for me. When you're not doing a puzzle in this game, you're just wandering around trying to figure out where to go because you can't tell where anything is and the music gets repetitive fast and starts to get on your nerves. It's nothing but tedious. In fact, the entire game can feel mundane. What made Door to Phantomile so great in the first place is that it never got tiring. There may only be 14 levels which you can beat all of in a couple hours, but it's for the best. Moonlight Museum said, "Screw staying interesting the whole way through. Let's make every area blend together along with them all using the exact same music track for each vision of the world and combine that with pretty boring level design to make the overall experience overstay its welcome." The visions are typically much shorter in length than Phantomile's, but having 6 in each world only makes them start dragging on and tiger puss. And if I didn't make the game sound stale enough, they literally reuse puzzles. What's up with that? The only time I can say I really enjoyed the level design was during the extra visions. Now these are fun as not heaven. They really push the limits of your Klonoa skills. The extra vision in Door to Phantomile was already one of my favorite levels, and now there are 6. This is the most amount of action you'll be getting in Moonlight Museum. If you're a puzzle enthusiast, these additional levels have got you covered with some of the best in the game. I'm not sure if there are any prerequisites aside from completing the game to unlock these, but they are very worth the effort. After how monotonous the main game can feel, this is a breath of fresh air. Surely if the story wasn't anything great and the gameplay was very flawed, the music has to be a saving grace, right? Feel free to make fun of me for my awful wrong opinion, but I actually don't mind Moonlight Museum's soundtrack. In fact, I kind of like it in all honesty. Don't get me wrong, some songs are pretty annoying. Or absolutely horrendous. The music loop could have been longer, and the WonderSwan is capable of way more in the audio department. But the rest of the songs, they aren't too bad. In fact, some are great. House of Clouds I'm quite fond of. Laughing Prison is pretty catchy. Quiet Hometown sounds a lot like Mind of Light, which was one of my favorite songs from the first game. And then there's the prologue music. Hands down, the best track in the game. I know some people who hate Moonlight Museum's music admit this song is great. In fact, it was so good they remixed it in Lunatea's Veil for Maze of Memories. It's far from my favorite soundtrack out there, but I do think it's a bit underrated. It's really just a matter of taste. You'd have to decide for yourself if you think this music is good. And a majority of you will probably dislike it, but that's not gonna stop me from guilty, pleasurably enjoying it. The soundtrack definitely isn't the best out there, but the game is aesthetically pleasing, right? Well, kind of? I mean, I always thought Moonlight Museum looked pretty good visually, though I wasn't sure how it stacked up to the rest of the WonderSwan library. For this review, I decided to play a couple other games on the system, just to get an idea of what the console is capable of. I mainly stuck to original WonderSwan games so it'd be equal, but I did look at a couple color games as well. While I haven't seen everything the WonderSwan has to offer, I can safely confirm that Moonlight Museum is actually good looking for the console standards. I mean, it might not be the best looking game here, but it's not like an eyesore or anything like that, and as I mentioned previously, the sprite work is really nice. Yes, the game would have benefited if it was on the WonderSwan color, but I'm not going to lose any sleep over Moonlight Museum being in black and white. Plus, let's be honest, any game would look better in full color and the upgraded model wasn't even out yet. That's just about everything I have to say about Klonoa Moonlight Museum. Even if I complained about it a lot near the end, I did enjoy this game. The sprite work is decent, at least for a game released in the launch window, the music is good, for the most part, new additions to the series were made, and the puzzles are pretty fun. Calling this game unimportant to Klonoa's history definitely isn't true. But at the same time, it just got tiring quickly. Maybe if the story was even remotely compelling, or the environments didn't all look the same, or there were more assets being added constantly, or the level design wasn't so boring for the most part, then I'd appreciate this game more than I did. But you know what? That technically already happened. The GBA Klonoa games play very similarly to Moonlight Museum. In fact, the level design in Empire of Dreams shares a lot of elements with this game's. Not to mention, the stories are more enticing, the soundtracks are way better, and the graphics are obviously in full color. It's kind of hard for me to recommend anyone go out and play Moonlight Museum. For crying out loud, it's on a WonderSwan, and how many people own a freaking WonderSwan? If there are any WonderSwan owners watching this, you're allowed to make fun of me. And if you do have one, you should totally try to get your hands on this game. With that being said, Klonoa Moonlight Museum takes the cake for the least good Klonoa game, like I literally stated in the title. Not bad or anything, just nothing special anymore. It's a decent out of 10 kind of game. If you've never played a Klonoa game, then what the heck are you doing? Go and play one of them. Actually, that might be a little hard, unless you're willing to dish out this much money, or this much money, or this much money, or this much— oh wait, that's actually not too bad. You can also buy the original on PSN for only $6, so if you own a PS3, PSP, or PS Vita, you should definitely pay for it there. I can guarantee that you may or may not enjoy the experience. Hopefully the former. But anyways, until next time, this is Blue10, reviewing more games from Dead Series. A girl's upset over this, so Klonoa shows up out of nowhere, exclaims, "Yupa! Reparudo!" and sets off to recover the fragments and return the moon to its former glory.